best back exercise for a huge back. Stay tuned. Find out. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RXMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, diet, training, supplementation. It is all on the table. We are now just over 6 weeks out of the Olympia. So next week, we're going to be starting our road to the Olympia, our Iron Road to the Olympia, where we'll be doing Iron debate, preview segments, interviews of some of the top Olympians, and a lot more in terms of our pre-Olympia coverage. And then, of course, during the big weekend, we're going to have our full crew there for a second year in a row. Dave will be in person on site at the Olympia. I know Chris Aceto will be there as well. You never know who we're going to get in the wrap-up, but it'll be a lot of fun. And, of course, we're going to have you all covered wall-to-wall as soon as we touch down in Vegas. So, again, keep it locked. Next week, starting our Iron Road to the Olympia. We're going to go right into the questions. The first two questions on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, coconut water. I know this is something that you're particular about in terms of hydration. After I lift, I get into the habit of drinking 535 ml of coconut water. Is this good to do when on diet?
As you know, now that I'm a Floridian for the last 9 years or so, I have coconut trees in my backyard, so I can tap my own coconut if I want. But the truth is that, yeah, coconut water is good in terms of electrolyte replacement. It has a little bit of carbs, a little bit of sugar in it, but it's got like potassium and it's got sodium in it. And it actually, if you look at the electrolyte balance of coconut water versus the serum of your blood, it's almost exactly the same. So, which is good because it makes it easier to absorb, when you're drinking it. Problem is when you're dieting, I personally wouldn't want to be putting that extra sugar into my body, post or at any point during the day. It's kind of like wasted calories. Off season, I have no problem with coconut water. To be honest with you, coconut water on a really, warm day where you're really dying of thirst tastes delicious. But I find that when I add coconut water to a lot of things, it kind of changes the taste a lot. So I don't really use a lot of it during my day. Like I said, if I was really thirsty and I was at on the beach or something like that and they were selling coconut water, I'd probably get one because good for fluid replacement. And it's not a bad idea. You can mix it with, some like amino acids if you want to drink it in the gym off season, which I think is fine. But if you remember those Prime Energy drinks that what's his name, the Logan Paul puts out?
Yeah.
Those
all the kids want.
I think that ruins the taste. They have coconut water in those. And I just can't get behind it because it's like a fruity taste combined with the coconut. It just doesn't mesh right. Like to me, like vanilla or chocolate with coconut tastes good, but not like fruity flavors. So I'm not really a huge coconut fan, but I wouldn't use it pre-contest only because of the sugar content.
Second question, again, these first two questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Another question that's up your alley, and that is back training. Specifically Dorian style versus Arnold style. You mentioned bent over rows as one of the exercises for widening the lower lats. What do you recommend on form? Dorian Yates style where you're bent over slightly, or more like Arnold's where you're way bent over? How about grip width?
Yeah, I like Dorian's philosophy on grip width. His philosophy is if you go too wide, even on pull downs, you're not really widening your back. You're actually making yourself weaker because when you come away from your body, you're not as strong. When you're closer to your body, you pull better. So I think that on pulls, even on reverse, you can go reverse grip, you can go overhand. I happen to go overhand because I'm always afraid I'm going to tear a bicep when I do the rows. I like about shoulder width is usually about as good, or a little wider than shoulder width. I don't like to get too wide on it because I think you, like I said, like Dorian says, you get weaker. So if you want to lift maximum weights to get the best results, I think that's important. Where I kind of differ on Dorian is I don't really like. He almost was in like a stand-up position when he did it. Arnold was bent over more. I like Arnold's positioning better a little bit, maybe not quite as extreme. It seems like it's always like somewhere in the middle, the right answer. Because if you lean over too much, sometimes it puts you back in a compromised position. Obviously, you'd want to wear a belt on bent over rows. But if you stand up too much, it's like you can use your traps really easily. Now Dorian had really good form on his rows, so for him, he felt it exclusively in his back, but he had a huge back. If you're trying to just build a back, a lot of times when you're standing upright too much, you use your traps. You just shrug up with your traps, and you're not even getting your back involved. So I think if you lean over more, it forces you to use your lats. Some people have trouble, with that flexibility issue, and of course, you don't want to round your back. You want to keep your back in a slightly arched position, so you don't, put your lower back in a compromised position. But really, somewhere in between Dorian and where Arnold stood is probably the right place to do it. Like I said, I try to lean over as much as possible, without compromising rounding my back. And I always pull low. So if you pull too high, you're going to use your traps. You want to keep your traps down, because if your traps are up, then you're using those to pull the weight. If the traps are down, the traps can't help you really very much, except the lower traps, which is fine. You want to work those anyway. You really want to try to focus on pulling into your lower stomach, which is going to force the lower lats to really contract more, which is going to add that mass and width. I think the bent over row is probably the purest back movement that you can do. We always say I always say incline barbell press is the best chest developer because it works, the upper and mid pecs, which is what we want. For legs, squatting, free weight squatting is the bread and butter, and deadlifting, it kind of works with legs and back to a certain degree for lower back thickness and then trap thickness. So, you have to include bent over rows as one of the basic free weight moves that you just have to incorporate if you want to get big. And a lot of people don't like it because it's hard. Because to hold your position, you hold your body in that position. Also, you should always use straps or grippers when you're doing it, so you don't have your forearms as being the weak link. But it's a difficult exercise. It gets you out of breath because you have to hold and stabilize the weight. But that's why it's so good, because not only are you pulling the weight, you're stabilizing the weight as well with your whole body. So it's really a total body mass builder. And if you can get strong and you can use full range of motion on those, you have to have a big back. It's impossible not to, because you can't cheat. Whereas, unless you're using your traps, of course. Whereas when you're on a machine, the machine is doing almost 80% of the job for you, because it's stabilizing the weight. All you're doing is pulling. So yeah, you're getting a nice concentrated contraction in your lats, but the lats are not stabilizing. It's like I said, it's like doing hammer strength for chest versus free weights for chest, or it's like doing Smith machine squats versus free weight squat. You're just going to get more from the free weight exercises because you have to balance that weight, and that's very important. These are two good questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. It's an app I offer to everyone out there. You can download it on your Android or in your iTunes from the store. It's $29 a month. You get access to all my writings, all my videos in one place. Plus, I answer everyone's questions in an open forum, so everyone gets their questions answered and they can see everyone else's questions and answers. It's a learning experience. We put up a special Q&A video every single week. In addition to this Ask Dave that you get for free on YouTube, you get another one on the app. You get a workout every week, put up there, and all my protocols, my off-season diets, my pre-contest, my ketogenic diet, all my detoxes, all the cycles that I recommend. Everything is in one place. A great learning tool. A lot of people have subscribed. You guys support the app. That's why I keep putting a lot of effort into it. I want to thank you for doing that.
Let's take questions from our Instagram and Facebook page. Again, on Instagram, official_RX Muscle. Facebook, just go into the search bar if you're not already following us. Type in RX muscle. Another training related question from Mademan 1982. How to avoid bicep tears on preacher curls? Should they be avoided, or are people doing it wrong?
It's an interesting question. And I always felt that when I would do a preacher curl, whether it be just a regular preacher free weight, movement, when your arm is in that, where there's like a bench underneath it and your arm is like in this position, and it prevents you from cheating, really, essentially. I mean, it's, I always do one arm at a time. I don't like to do two arms at a time because I always feel like one arm is getting more work. It's a good concentrated movement. It forces the biceps to be isolated and work on their own. The problem is it puts your bicep in a very compromised position, meaning that you can tear a bicep pretty easily there. I see people use way too much weight. I see them jerk the weights up and and use momentum. You're just looking to tear a bicep doing that. That movement is not a heavy movement. You shouldn't be lifting a lot of weight. It's a concentrated movement where you're really trying to just focus on flexing that bicep, isolating it. It's not going to be that strong compared to what you would do with, with a barbell or dumbbell or cable curl. It's an isolated finishing movement. And if you understand that in your head, you can safely do it because you're not going to try to put too much weight on there. If you try to put too much weight and you use a ballistic type movement where you're jerking, you're going to tear. Okay, because there's no way for the muscle to kind of move. There's no way for your arm to kind of readjust. So if you put too much pressure on it in that position, it will pop. And I've seen guys pop biceps on that machine. So once again, it's not that it's a dangerous movement. It's a dangerous movement if you put too much weight on it. And I think that that's what you have to keep in mind when you do it.
We had a question like this last week. I don't know if I took it or not, but it's a question about starting a prep. And I'm not sure if we really answered in this perspective before, but how does an athlete know when to start a prep in terms of how many weeks out? Obviously, would it depend on the athlete? What factors do you take into consideration when coaching your clients as far as when they should or how far out they should start their prep?
Yeah. For most people, 16 weeks is adequate. Sometimes the women, I like to start at 18 weeks. If the person is overweight, has a lot of body fat on them, for whatever reason, they just got too fat in the off season, or maybe they've never done a show before and they have some baby fat, or they have fat that they, just never have dieted off, I might go 20 weeks. On people who are really, really, I work with people who are, who had a lot of muscle but were really overweight. Like I've done 6-month diets with them, and they didn't even know they were going to do a show, but they started looking so good that we decided, hey, let's do a show. We'll extend this an extra 6 weeks. But for most people, it's 16 to 18 weeks is good. I mean, can I get people in shape in 8 weeks? Yeah. Have I done it? Of course. There's a lot of people that come to me and they're pretty lean, so, but I like to start my diet about 16 weeks out. Even I used to do it even when I used to compete, because even if it seems like a long time, and for someone like me who doesn't need to diet that long, it gives you the flexibility to take your time to make adjustments and accommodations. If something doesn't look right, like body part wise, you can still make improvements. It's you don't want to do a rush job. Rush jobs never work because then you have to do extreme things. You have to do a lot more cardio sometimes, and sometimes it just it depletes the body out too much. So once again, I think if you do too long of a diet for some people though too, that's not good either because they mentally can't handle it. Some people like the torture of it. I work with people, they want to diet all year round. But for most people, 4 months is something that they can wrap their head around and really focus on. If you start getting longer than that, it's like they lose interest or it's too much mentally. And then what happens is they get to 4 weeks out and they're almost there and then they quit. And they're like, I can't do this. It's affecting my life. I'm not going to my job. I'm going to lose my job. And it's so there's got to be like a sweet spot. If you can't get in shape in 16 weeks, it means you probably got too fat in the off season, or it means you're just a cheater, because I can get pretty much anyone in shape in 16 weeks, pending, assuming that they're doing things right in the off season. So that's the long and short of it.
Bilal Hamidi, my shoulder flexibility got so bad I can't even put a bar on my traps to do squats. How do I go about fixing my shoulder mobility?
Well, I mean, obviously flexibility is an important thing. The problem is, when people tell me their hips are tight or their quads are tight or the calves, you can get on the floor and you can stretch. You know what I mean? It's a little harder to stretch your upper body yourself because it's just awkward, and it's, you can lean against the wall and, you stretch your pecs and shoulders out, but it's nice to go get a massage and have your massage therapist stretch pull your hand behind your head. And this way, as they're stretching you, they can kind of massage it and kind of loosen that joint up. It sounds like from what he's done, he's going to definitely need someone to help stretch him. There are stretching clinics. I think I mentioned these before that they have now. I wish they had one right here in Cape Coral, Fort Myers. I would absolutely go to it, where they actually will do stretching sessions. It's like they have half hour, hour and a half sessions where you actually go in there and that's all they do is they stretch you. It's a great idea. I wish I would have thought of it. And they're starting to pop up. There's like a franchise there that they do this at. And for bodybuilders, it's probably worth its weight in gold, especially if you're really tight in that shoulder. Because I see people, they can't even pose on stage because they have no flexibility through here whatsoever. They lose it because they're all bound up with scar tissue, and it's unfortunate because they have a lot of muscle, they just can't display it. So it absolutely, and a lot of people, what happens is they get the scar tissue in here, and then if you notice, they start coming. It's like everything's forward, so they have all this muscle, but they can't like pull everything back and hit that pose because everything is so bound up in here. So tight pecs is really something that a lot of bodybuilders need to work on. And once again, you can go for deep tissue massage for that. ART is really good for that. I'm going to showcase a little video probably next week. A good friend of mine, Raheel from New York, came down here and he did some what's called shockwave therapy on me. It's like a machine. It looks like a ultrasound wand, and they actually use the same lubricant, and it like basically is like a piston that kind of does this type of thing, and it shocks the muscle essentially. But what it's doing is it's actually acting like almost like acupuncture and deep tissue at the same time. And he did it on a couple of my foot because I had some scar tissue on my foot, and he did on my quads, and I'm telling you, it felt really, really good. Did my glutes, loosened up my whole pelvic structure. So that's another really interesting therapy that I think a lot of people can start getting into. And, I like to find new therapies and introduce them to you guys, but shockwave, you heard it here first.
I think you answered this not too long ago, but again, it is one that we do get asked a lot. Very relevant question about cardio. Stairmaster stepper versus treadmill. Which would you provide? Which would you recommend based off maybe pre-contest, just a few weeks out? Is there any variations to your recommendations for cardio?
It's a tricky question, and I'll tell you why. And there's going to be a sexually diverse answer to this question. And the reason is because women don't lose muscle. It's very hard for women to lose muscle. And the reason why they don't lose muscle is because evolutionarily speaking, they have a mechanism in their body to preserve lean tissue. Because during, when women would get pregnant, especially back before we had modernization during cavemen time, all right, there wasn't always food available. So if women would starve very easily and lose lean tissue, they would never make it through childbearing years. So there's a mechanism there that preserves muscle. Makes it harder for them to lose body fat on the lower body too. And that's why men get in shape more easily. But this mechanism is interesting because you can give women a lot more cardio and a lot more higher intense cardio, and they don't seem to, it doesn't affect them negatively. Whereas if you give a guy too much stairmaster or step climber, he loses his legs. The body just cannibalizes that muscle. So you're not doing these exercises. I think a lot of people have this mistake in their mind that they're doing these exercises like stepper and they're kicking back while they're doing it because they think they're going to bring in their glutes. You don't bring in anything doing cardio. Cardio burns fat equally throughout the entire body. No matter how much you do or what intensity level you do it, it doesn't pull from one area because you're stepping up a mountain, okay? It just doesn't. Will your glutes get sore? Yeah, if you walk on a Stairmaster, yeah, sure, because you're breaking down the glute muscle. So if anything, you might be losing muscle back there because of that. Once again, doesn't apply to women because women don't seem to lose muscle, okay? From my experience, very hard to get them to lose muscle, But for men, it's very easy to overtrain your legs doing too much stepper or too much, stair climber. So during contest prep, the goal is not to get in cardiovascular shape. The goal is to burn body fat. And the best way, and I've said this a million times, I'm going to say it again, the best way to burn body fat is steady state cardio that's not too intense. Because when the intensity level gets too high, like doing a stepper or stairmaster. A lot of times you're going much harder when that you're sweating a lot more. The intensity level's tougher. When you do that, your body has to use carbohydrates as a fuel source. Cannot generate ATP fast enough, which is the fuel source from burning, during a high intensity cardio session. Whereas during lower, or steady state cardio, as we call it, the body burns exclusively stored body fat, which is what we want. So to go do high intensity cardio or a cardio, even though you might not be walking fast on the treadmill, it's high intensity because it's a hard exercise to do. You're really doing disservice to the fat burning that you're trying to do. You might get your heart in better condition, but you're not going to burn fat preferentially on your legs. So it's kind of a waste of time. Now, sometimes with women, because they get stuck, we'll give them more stepper or more stairmaster to raise the intensity level a little bit to kind of burn some more calories, because you're not going to be worried about them burning through muscle. But if I'm giving a woman 2.5 hours or 2 hours of cardio because they're behind and they need to lose fat, I certainly don't want them on the stairmaster for 2.5 hours. That's nuts. They're going to lose their mind, and they're going to feel so overtrained. So you have to balance it. To me, the best exercises are the low intensity or the low impact, I should say, cardio, stepper. Elliptical, the recumbent or regular bike, and treadmill. I think that's really should be your bread and butter of your cardio when you're getting ready for a show. There's no reason to be doing the high intensity stuff. Like I said, you're not building or bringing in glutes by doing stepper and squeezing your glutes on every single thing. It's just not happening. That's not how the body burns fat. And if you think you're going to build glutes doing that, go look at a marathon runner and see if the marathon runner has big legs because they run so much. No, their legs, because you're working the wrong fiber type. You're working slow twitch muscles when you're doing that. The only fibers that hypertrophy are the fast twitch muscle fibers. And the only way to get those to get bigger is to do brief, exercise of heavy weights like squats. So I think people confuse what they're doing sometimes in the gym. They don't know because they see other people doing it and they just copy them. But if you take this little bit of wisdom I'm giving you and you use it, it's going to help you achieve your goals a lot more easily without overtraining.
Let's go to Iron Wolf Health and Fitness. What do you think of Tom Platz's Olympia cycle? 20 mg of Winstrol a day, 100 mg of Deca per week, his words. How would he have responded to testosterone?
I don't believe that he didn't use testosterone. I think what these guys a lot of times did is they used it initially, and then when they got down to the last couple of weeks, because a lot of the dogma back in the day was to kind of get off anabolics like right before the show. So they would reduce the dosages like the last couple of weeks. So I think when a lot of these guys give you their cycles, prior to a show, they're giving you the last couple of weeks cycles, which is really not indicative of what they were doing previous to that. Now, guys in those era weren't taking thousands of milligrams of stuff a week. They didn't do that. I mean, that's just not what anyone did. There was a certain protocol they used, and that was it. They would do like, 4 to 600 milligrams of testosterone a week. Maybe like 400 milligrams of Deca a week. They take like Dianabol or Anadrol, and then as the show got closer, they start cutting out some of those what they would call water drugs. And it's because they didn't want to hold water. They didn't, I don't think they really relied on a lot of diuretics and stuff like that. They kind of used diet manipulation and stuff like that to get rid of that type of stuff. And that's just the science was not there. People just didn't know what to do, and they really didn't understand how these drugs worked. They just by convention did this. And, they would go into the pharmacy and fill the prescription that their doctor would write for them. The stuff was not illegal. It was like getting an antibiotic prescription. So they used what was available at the pharmacies. And then some guys had access to some European stuff, but it wasn't a big deal. And no one abused stuff. First of all, also all the stuff was real, so things worked a lot better. And they didn't have to worry about, I wonder if what I have is fake or not. Maybe I should take double the dosage. No one had that thought. Everyone knew what they were taking was real, and it worked. And they trained hard, and that's what they did. So I don't believe necessarily that that's what Tom Platz did the whole cycle. I think it was probably toward the end of what he did. And I think if guys followed that today, they probably wouldn't get the results that Tom Platz got either, because I don't think anyone trained like Tom Platz trained. So take it for a grain of salt. A lot of times you're getting a snapshot of what someone did for a short period of time. You're not really getting the full gist of what they were doing on a regular basis.
Take a couple of more questions. Matt Black, when do you start growing from test E, as in How long will the testosterone saturate in the body for it to start effectively working?
Well, it's a tough question. It's not really a tough question. It's a silly question. I'll tell you why. Because let's say you start taking testosterone and anti-or, which are long-acting esters today. Okay, you haven't been on anything. Okay, you probably won't feel it for about 2.5, 3 weeks, and then you'll start saying, "Wow, I'm getting stronger. I'm a lot fuller." And people say, "Oh, you look bad," but the stuff is working for those first 3 weeks. It's building red blood cells. It's increasing recovery time. It's increasing blood volume, but it's doing it slowly because it's a very slow release type of situation. So by the third week, you're at maximum levels in your body and your body's starting to respond. The good thing about that is when you stop the cycle, you're going to have 3 weeks after you stop taking the drugs that they're still going to be working because remember, they last a long time. So you're not losing 3 weeks in the beginning. You're just getting 3 weeks added to the end, really. And you are getting benefits from it. It's just you just don't see them because it takes a while for them to cumulatively start to, accumulate. I don't know if that sounds a little redundant, but whatever. The point is that you're not getting cheated by taking a long-acting ester. And people say, well, maybe I should take like dianabol and anadrol the first 3 weeks to kick in the stuff. You don't have to kick it in. It's kicking in on its own. It's just taking a few weeks to do it. There's no reason to overdo things. And I think people have this lack of patience. They want everything immediately. Okay. All you're going to do is cause immediate fluid gain. You're not going to cause any better results. The stuff has to accumulate. You have to start training. You have to break down the muscle. You have to eat the foods. So that first 3 weeks is what I call a transition period as everything's starting to kind of kick in together. But you're not getting cheated because you're getting those 3 weeks back on the end after you stop the cycle.
Full disclosure, do we have time for one more, or are the guys ready to record?
Just do another quickie, one more.
Let's take one more. From Alan Minch, if I take 20 mg dbol a day, should I divide the dose into 10 mg doses because of the short half-life, or just take the full 20 mg an hour or so before lifting for full strength effect?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything with orals. It's nice to come out and split them up. I think that you can split them up by like maybe 4 or 5, 6 hours between the two dosages. Nothing wrong with that. Kind of spread them out. You get a little bit of better dispersion. I mean, some people say I like to take them in the morning because I train early. I want that full effect of the dbol being in my system when I'm training. It doesn't matter later. Other people say, well, I want it now and I want it later when I'm recovering. So, I mean, you could kind of like flip a coin. Assuming you're on some kind of an injectable too, which I'm assuming the person is, then you have those other drugs still in the system. So some guys would like to take all the dbol in the morning because then they get the full effect of the drug immediately, and they're strong in the gym. If you train later in the day, you might want to split it up. So I mean, like I said, you're going to get the same benefit whether you split it or you take it all in one shot. It's just a matter of how you structure your training and what other drugs you're taking with it. So there's no wrong answer to that answer. I would probably split them up.
I'll have to take this one as well. Jeff Master Blaster Decker. I'm 50 years old, bodybuilder, started in the late 80s. Looking back at all the fitness fashions from back in the day, the T. Michael tops, the Optomax shoes, big belts, small belts. Which ones did you have pictures taken and they make you cringe now? And will you show them to your kids?
I wish I had more pictures of myself with all the crazy stuff. I'm sure I have them somewhere. The clown pants were probably the craziest. They used to have these big like legged pants, and they were like the most ridiculous colors of all times. You literally look like a clown, but if you had big legs, it kind of was cool because they weren't just like swinging in the wind. Like they actually fit you almost form fitting. Especially my legs were huge at one point. So, and they were very comfortable to wear. Whereas, if you put a pair of jeans on and you have 33-inch quads, it's not comfortable. There's never a pair of jeans that are ever going to be comfortable. So they served a good purpose, and that was the fashion at the time. So no one looked at you weird, but looking back at pictures of those pants, they were ridiculous, some of them. And they started making them crazier and crazier looking because they wanted to see how crazy they could make them look. And that's why Gary Stridham called his company Crazy Wear, because that's really what it was. And it was a fun era, that's for sure. I liked the big sweatshirts. Those were great. I wish they would come back, to be honest with you, because they were so comfortable. All cotton. They kind of fit bodybuilders well. They were tapered. It was those things certainly were not embarrassing. Probably the hot skin, like the hot skin tights were also a little on the effeminate side, but no one cared if you had 30-inch quads, and you put on a pair of hot skins with stripes on them. No one said a word to you. If you wore them and you had no legs, it looked a little weird. But those were a little bit. But I think the clown pants have to take the cake for the weirdest looking things that I've ever seen in fashion, for sure.
And that's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Right now on the channel, on the episode of the aforementioned After Hours, on the episode of Heavy Muscle Radio. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of our show segments. Again, a reminder, next week we start all of our Olympia coverage. So 6 weeks strong, riding into the Olympia, interviews, iron debates, preview segments, everything you expect from us pre-Olympia. And then, of course, everything you expect from us on Olympia weekend. Subscribe below, notification bell. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we appreciate all of your support. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.